Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're skipping the dry textbooks and the complicated economic charts. Instead, we're going to talk about a guy named Leo. Now, Leo is just your everyday, normal guy. He's warm, a little funny, and absolutely not an economist. He just really loves to bake. So recently, he opened up this little bakery in his town, pouring his absolute heart into making the perfect sourdough. But one morning, while he's wiping the flour off his hands, he glances up at the tiny TV in the corner of his shop and hears a news anchor talking about the national economy. And suddenly, this massive, abstract concept hits him literally right in the face. He's about to figure out how the world works the hard way.
So, the news anchor happily reports the economy produced exactly $1,000 worth of bread today. Now, Leo is just standing there, completely covered in flour, staring at his TV in total confusion. He literally just checked his cash register, and he happened to sell exactly $1,000 worth of bread that morning. He's scratching his head thinking, wait a minute. Did my tiny little bakery just single-handedly drive the entire national economy today? Like, how do they even calculate a number like that?
Leo decides he needs to figure out his true worth. So he sits down with a notepad and he starts mapping out the entire life cycle of his bread. He jots down the $10 the local farmer spent on seeds. Then, the $500 the miller paid the farmer for the harvested wheat. Next, the $700 Leo himself paid the miller for the ground flour. And finally, the $1,000 his customers paid him for the fresh bread. He adds the whole shebang up. 10 plus 500 plus 700 plus 1,000. He stares at the paper, just totally stunned.
He's thinking to himself, there's no way I didn't make $1,000. My bread just generated over $2,200 for the economy. He is literally picking up the phone, ready to call the news station and demand a correction. But right then, his neighbor, who happens to teach business, stops by for a coffee and totally bursts Leo's bubble. He forces Leo to realize a fundamental rule. Gross domestic product, or GDP, only measures the market value of the final product, in this case, just the $1,000 loaf of bread. Why? Because the value of the flour, the wheat, and the seeds, they're already baked into the price of that final loaf. If the government counted all those steps individually, they'd be counting the exact same batch of flour twice or even 3 times. So, to avoid that double counting nightmare, the economy only looks at the finished good crossing the finish line.
All right, moving to part 1, who buys the bread? Leo figures out his customers. Life is about to force Leo to figure out exactly how the economy calculates this GDP, just by looking at who is actually walking through his bakery doors. He knows the final value is $1,000, but where exactly is that money coming from?
Without even realizing it, Leo's Everyday Tuesday breaks down exactly what economists call the expenditure method. He just looks at his receipts. First, the family next door buys a few loaves for breakfast. Well, that's household consumption. Then, the cafe down the street buys a whole new batch of his bread, and Leo himself buys a shiny new oven for his kitchen. Boom, business investment. Later, the town hall orders a massive catering spread for a local meeting. That's government spending. And finally, he ships a few special sourdough loaves to a neighboring town, but he subtracts the cost of the fancy imported sea salt he buys from abroad. That right there is net exports. So Leo just naturally discovered the famous formula without opening a single textbook: C plus I plus G plus NX.
And suddenly, it clicks. He realizes he's part of this massive living loop. You see, the money Leo takes in from all these different customers doesn't just sit in a vault somewhere. It exactly equals the income that gets distributed right back out to households. He pays wages to his assistant, rent to his landlord, and keeps a little profit for himself. The money flows from households to firms, and from firms right back to households. It just keeps the whole economic cycle spinning, day in and day out.
Okay, part 2, the illusion of wealth. Leo's bakery hits a snag. Let's fast forward a bit.
So, a whole year passes, and Leo is absolutely thrilled. He checks his books at the end of the year, and his revenues have completely doubled. His cash register is literally overflowing. He's thinking, I am getting rich. He even starts browsing brochures for luxury vacations. But right when he's about to book a trip, reality hits him right in the wallet. He goes to his supplier to buy flour, and his jaw drops. A bag of flour costs twice as much as it did last year. His assistant's wages had to double just so she could afford her rent. His electricity bill skyrocketed. Leo discovers the hard way the difference between numbers on a piece of paper and actual reality. His nominal GDP, the raw, unadjusted numbers at current prices, looks amazing. But his real GDP? It hasn't grown at all. Inflation just completely ate his profits.
To actually find out if he's doing better, Leo realizes he has to use a price index, like a GDP deflator, to strip away that inflation illusion. If you look at his nominal revenue, it's sky high. But when he applies the prices from his very first year of business to this year's sales, that second bar shows the cold, hard truth. He didn't actually bake more bread. He didn't work any harder or produce any more actual value. Prices just went up. He's basically running on a treadmill, going as fast as he can just to stay in the exact same place.
Part 3. Comparing apples to apples. Leo visits his cousin abroad. Exhausted from this massive inflation headache, Leo really needs a break. So, he takes a vacation to visit his cousin in another country. Now, Leo's feeling a little sorry for himself, but he also feels bad for his cousin because on paper, his cousin earns a much lower nominal income than Leo does back home. But then, Leo pulls up to his cousin's address and his jaw drops for the second time this story. His cousin lives in this beautiful, massive house with a huge garden. Meanwhile, Leo is back home struggling to pay rent on a tiny little apartment above his bakery. Leo looks at the numbers again. Yes, Leo has a high nominal income, but the cost of goods in his city is astronomical. His cousin earns less raw money, sure, but a loaf of bread, a tank of gas, and a month of rent cost a tiny fraction of what Leo pays.
And this realization is the absolute core of purchasing power parity, or PPP. Leo finally gets it. You can't just convert his cousin's currency to his own using the market exchange rate and say, hey, I am richer than you. PPP factors in the relative cost of local goods and services. It shows Leo that because local prices in his cousin's country are so much lower, the exact same nominal amount of money buys significantly more stuff. He realizes that a high nominal income really doesn't tell you anything about how well someone is actually living unless you adjust for what that money can actually buy in their specific town.
Which brings us to part 4. What bread cannot measure. Leo's ultimate realization. So Leo comes back home, right?
Over the next few years, he works tirelessly. He expands the bakery, he optimizes the ovens, and he bakes more bread than ever before. This time, there are no inflation tricks. His real GDP is sky high. He's objectively producing more value. But as he stands in his booming bakery, looking at stacks of cash, he realizes that, despite his financial success, something is terribly wrong. He looks in the mirror. The guy hasn't taken a day off in 3 years. He has zero free time. He walks outside, and he notices the local river is murky and polluted from the massive industrial flour mills supplying him. He is stressed, burnt out, his health is tanking. On top of that, he thinks about his elderly mother, who he cares for every single Sunday. It's an exhausting, crucial job that goes completely unpaid, meaning it is entirely ignored by economic statistics. He realizes the national GDP metric completely ignores environmental degradation, the loss of leisure time, and just overall human well-being.
So Leo turns off the ovens for the day, locks the front door, and finally connects all the dots in the simplest way possible. GDP is just a tool. It's super useful for measuring market output, tracking inflation, and seeing if the factories are running, but it has massive, massive blind spots. It measures everything we produce, but it tells us absolutely nothing about how we actually feel. And that leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to take away from Leo's journey. If our economy is growing relentlessly, but our rivers are dirty, our stress is through the roof, and we are just too exhausted to sit down and enjoy a fresh slice of bread, are we truly wealthy?